Okay, so my name is Rajiv. I come from Aarhus University, and I've been working with open innovation for the last 3 years, and we have our own incubator as well for entrepreneurs at the university, and this is mostly student entrepreneurs, right? It doesn't matter if you're a bachelor student, a master's student, or a PhD student. So, but I've just recently moved back to the science and technology area. So my own background is science and technology. So I did my PhD in biophysics way back in 2007. And since then, I've been working I worked with nanotechnology for about a couple of years. I moved and then did a business degree in sustainability. I then moved to the Department of Marketing and did a postdoc in organizational psychology. And after which I moved to the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation and started working with games, gamification, and open innovation as an area. So together with student entrepreneurship. So that gives you a little bit of a very interdisciplinary background that I have, and I bring a lot of this at work into the new faculty now. So, but that's about myself, and there's something already in there. But I'm here basically to talk a little more about innovation, and I thought the reason we decided to switch places, but I thought it was more important for me to just set the scene before you actually hear Nicholas's very specific case. So I'm going to give you sort of an overview, a broad picture of what open innovation really is. How many of you here have actually heard of the term open innovation? Great. So that's how many of you here actually work with open innovation? Not that many, right? So, and I think I haven't used the term open innovation here. You'll see it a couple of places of my slides. I actually think the standard of innovation just has to be open. We cannot keep having these discussions of this is closed or this is open. It just has to be open. Innovation, by definition, is also quite open in itself. That was how it was started. But what we see, and which is why I have this sort of controversial title here, is that innovation is dead, long live innovation. Right? The idea being that we are seeing a new world of innovation that's being formed. So let me take you to why this is happening. This is actually happening because we are right now in what I call the era of connectivity. Right? The era of connectivity because we are really connected by so many ways that we don't really, it's so easy to get connected to each other. But if you just look at projections, and this is by a consultancy firm that predicts that by the year 2020, we're going to be approximately 4 billion connected people, right? We're going to be using 25 plus million apps. You probably use a lot of those already, but by 2020, this number is really going to grow. It's growing exponentially. We're going to be using 25 plus billion embedded and intelligent systems. But more importantly, we're going to be trading 50 trillion gigabytes of data, right? That's no small number. So if I were to now rephrase, actually, it's not only the era of connectivity, it's an era of unprecedented connectivity, right? Humankind has not ever connected like this ever before. And this gives us both challenges and opportunities at the same time. So that's why I say that innovation as we know it is dead, right? It is a completely new way of thinking that we're trying to bring forward. And why is this happening? And this is because we have moved away from these closed models that we call them to what I like to use the term distributed, actually. I prefer the term distributed over open, even though that's what we're working with. So the reason that we have moved from closed to distributed innovation is that in the early 19th century, the interaction between the participants used to be at a very individual level. You had individual innovators, inventors who would come up with things and make discoveries. Later in the 20th century, we had what we call as corporate innovation. So the corporates came over, they started coming and giving us a lot more control over these processes, trying to identify how we can build these things. But then then in the 21st century, we have moved into distributed innovation. And this kind of distributed innovation is so true that no company in the world today has access to all the knowledge that we have. Even if you take the big, really giant companies, so Google. And we know that Google has a lot of data and Google stores a lot of data, but even Google, with all its knowledge, doesn't know everything that is out there, right? That's the amount of data, that's the amount of knowledge we're dealing with at the moment. And that's why distributed innovation has become so critical, right? Because there's knowledge everywhere, and you just need to create value by being able to connect the right dots at the right time. So if you see the closed innovation model, which is the dead innovation model, is basically what you had ideas going through this kind of funnel, and the whole idea that, okay, a funnel is going to help you filter out your best ideas, right? And some kind of expert sitting at these stage gates and deciding, very famous people who sit with companies and they say, you know, when to kill an idea. So this is, most companies used to use the term called the kill switch. And people used to love having the kill switch, you know. So it's almost, I think it's because you get the feeling of power, right? That, okay, I'm someone who can decide when I want to kill something. So, but the whole idea of the kill switch, that's something that you need to challenge, because we don't really know what's going out there, right? And then, of course, you would define your market. And then not only would you define it, you would also protect it with IP barriers. The IP here is a wall of protection for you to feel secure. But if you think about IP, why was IP introduced? IP was introduced so that one could further innovation. Today, IP is actually used to close yourself out. And that's the other biggest problem of IP in that sense, right? But anyway, this is not an IP lecture, so I'm not going to go into that. So this is what you actually see. The born-again innovation landscape is basically what we see, that we are operating in an area with multiple people in there. Right? You have the universities, you have the government, you have a lot of intermediaries who try and work with things, you have companies, and all of them are interacting in one way or another. Right? Keep thinking in the whole idea of connectivity here, right? And IP is also, we are starting to see a lot more move towards public domain IP, and ideas are now competing openly in a porous marketplace. Right? The marketplace is porous, and ideas have to compete so that the market is actually deciding what is the good idea, right? In many cases where you hear about crowdsourcing, the crowd decides what is actually a good idea, right? So, and if you think about the innovation ecosystem, we're actually seeing that we have these. So I apologize for maybe some of these, the people at the back might not be able to see these, but it's just for you to get an idea that basically you have a lot of people around here who can be grouped into different sections, right? So you have individuals as multiple colored dots. You have people still practicing close innovation, with whom we still have to interact. We have people who are now grouped with companies with different groupings of interest. We'll have externally focused collaborative innovation. That's the open innovation model that we call it. We also have a new movement as Open Innovation 2.0, and that's basically where you talk about ecosystem-centric cross-organizational innovation. And that basically means that you map an ecosystem, you try and figure out where is it that you sit in this ecosystem, and you try and make processes based on that. So this tells me that a lot of these things are being done with one single purpose, right? The purpose is to identify and serve at the end of it. So why are we doing all this innovation? We're doing all this innovation to actually have an end benefit. Now, an end benefit to a user, who I would now call also a customer, right? A customer who basically is benefiting from all of these innovations that we are doing in multiple spheres. It doesn't matter which industry we are in. All industries are very much taken by the whole area of innovation. And then we think that everyone knows that customers are important. I mean, you talk to any company, there's no company in this world who's not going to say that customers are not important, right? Everyone says customers are important. But listening to customers is even more, right? That's different. Knowing that the customer is important and listening to the customer is a different skill that a lot of people are now trying to adapt or adopt. So I give you a case example here. This is Siemens, and again, I'll just, if you can't read the data, I'll just very summarize it for you here. This is basically, they tried to map where origins of the best ideas were coming in Siemens, and they were trying to match it all across the world. So Siemens is a big company. It has a lot of, it works in the Asia Pacific region, North America, Western Europe, a lot of these places. And what you see is that when they were trying to find the best ideas in all four regions of the world, they're getting them from customers. So customers are the ones who are giving them the best ideas, right? Followed by the heads of business units, then the employees, then the in-house R&D team, then the CEO, then the business partners and suppliers. But right in the end here is the sales team, right? And who has the contact with the customers? It's the sales, right? And the customers are giving them ideas, but apparently not through the sales teams, right? And that tells you something, right? You know your customers are important, but you're not listening to your customers, right? So if you think about open innovation, therefore, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act where you need to actually figure out how do you balance between customer-driven innovation, getting ideas from customers so that they can help you develop your products further, or employees as well. So employees is a knowledge resource, and there's a balance that you need to handle here, right? And another thing that I really like to tell people a lot these days is about context, the importance of context. And we call this with this kind of idea that context is really king today, right? So content was king. It was actually first mentioned by Bill Gates in 1996. But what you think about is that, you know, content is basically what we produce, right? So for example, the R&Ds that we do, the R&D, that's content that we are producing, right? But that content cannot exist with proper context. That's the idea, right? So to give you an example, I use here, for example, Adobe uses its customer management experience, and if you think about how they're doing it, is that they have the customer at the center here, where the customer is actually, the context in which the customer is operating is what they have right in the middle. Then they follow by having users and profiles. Okay, what's the user, what's the profile that they have? Then they have the activity and social graph of the customer, and then they have the user-generated content. So what's the content label, right? So what is the content that the user is generating? But again, it's the context in which he's operating in makes them much easier to basically target their products. It gives the content meaning, right? That's the idea. And some people still think, no, but we really want to have, you know, our content is so cool and we want to keep producing this great content, right? And this great content, basically, if you want it to be king, you still need to understand that the context is the kingmaker behind, right? It's the context that can actually allow you to make sense of whatever content you're producing. So, and if context is important, you need to figure out, for example, where you are and where you want to go. So in the context of open innovation, if I put a matrix here, this was a study done by Pisano and Verganti, and they found that you have to look at the governance structures of an organization. Is the governance hierarchical or is it flat? Is it closed or is it open? The participation levels. What do you want, right? If you want open participation levels with a flat governance, you need to build an innovation community. And this innovation community is, for example, the Linux open source software community, for example. Or you have a flat structure with a closed participation, then you try and do it as a consortium. So you build a consortium of multiple partners, right? If you want, for example, hierarchical, you have that, but you want closed participation, you try and get what we call as the elite circle, where you sort of select certain experts and you try and get ideas from those, right? So these are ways that you need to consider the context. And if you think about it in the life science area, what we're actually seeing is that basically there has to be a newer model, because we are seeing that a lot more ways of us getting value from current products or current things in the market is actually going down. And the thing is, if you think about revenue itself, you have a lot of pressures that are on their revenue, right? And the pressure that comes on the revenue comes from either patent expiry dates, it comes from pricing pressures or short product lives. And a lot of these, for example, you can have new revenue streams if you start thinking about spin-offs, licensing, or many other ways. But it's about being open and opening up to those, right? And to give you another case example, open innovation actually improves success chances. And here you can actually see that drugs sourced via OI have a higher chance of success in later phase clinical trials. Right, again, showing you how open innovation can actually be very, very powerful and actually can give you a lot more success. This is the data from Deloitte, where they analyzed 281 biopharma companies from the year 1988 to 2012. Right. So, and how are we doing this now at the universities? From a university perspective, what we are working with is we're trying to challenge this image of the university as an ivory tower, where people, including companies, think that, oh, there's a lot of knowledge being generated at the university, but how do we access this knowledge? The university is viewed sometimes as a black box. Researchers who just work with their own stuff and don't want to share the knowledge, for example. So we're trying to break this down and moving into what we call this kind of quadruple helix idea, where we're actually trying to say, okay, everyone has a relation. The student has a relation to the faculty, right? The student is actually helping the faculty achieve academic excellence. Faculty, on the other hand, provides theoretical knowledge to the student. This knowledge can actually allow them to create, for example, business value to clients. And clients can be companies or governments. And clients, for example, can give back real-world experience to the student. On the other hand, we also have an ongoing relationship between the client and the faculty can provide technical expertise into different areas. So this is the way that we are trying to move towards to, right? And the future student that we want to develop, and that's my main focus also right now, is how do we actually enable what I call the T-shaped education. And the T-shaped education is basically, I let you be deep, you have a functional area of discipline or specialty, but also have a broad ability to work outside of core areas, right? And this is basically where interdisciplinary education is going to come in very useful. So the future of education is actually going to be, you're going to have one core specialization, but you're going to at least study 3 others at the same time, right? So you will actually be quite expert in those as well. So broad knowledge and also deep knowledge at the same time. And together, moving it with team-focused learning, where the idea is everything actually works in teams. And if collaboration is key, students need to know that actually you need to be able to learn how to work in teams, right? If you can't, if the education system does not train you to be a team player, you're going to come in the end at a company and you're not going to bring that together with you. So we need to tackle this also right at source, right? And that's what we are trying to do. So with this, I would like to end and say, welcome to the new world of innovation. Thank you.